From the New Arts and Media Studios here in River West, the greatest neighborhood in the world, it's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. From the new study file, this is one of my favorite pieces of advice. If you're ever just a little bit bored looking for some new information, just go to your friendly neighborhood search engine, type in 2 words, new study. You'll always find something interesting. There'll be pages and pages of results. New study finds. Well, you won't always have fun. Sometimes you get frustrated and annoyed. I'm afraid I have one of those. This is also from the no-duh file. You can cross-reference this one. Silver Spoon Oligarchs: How America's 50 Largest Inherited Wealth Dynasties Accelerate Inequality. The Institute for Policy Studies has done some in-depth research here and finds that, we hear a lot about, the billionaires, Bezos and Zuckerberg and Musk, the big guys. But generally speaking, the richest families, what they're calling here America's dynastic families, reading from the introduction to the report here, are deploying a range of wealth preservation strategies to further concentrate wealth and power. Power that is deployed to influence democratic institutions, depress civic imagination, and rig the rules to further entrench inequality. This tax avoidance means less support for the infrastructure we all rely on to preserve our health, safety, and quality of life. So, in other words, we're expanding the definition a little bit here. It's much more than just jealousy or envy. It's literally keeping the rest of the population, the whole world population, down. Our very health, our very safety, just a general quality of life suffers for everybody else. Some of us would like to see some sort of a ceiling. Some of us would like to see that ceiling lower than others. I, of course, have repeated many times right here that there should be no such thing as a billionaire. Nobody needs $1 billion. Something else I'm fond of repeating here, there's no shortage of anything. There's no shortage of resources. There's no shortage of money. There's no such thing as scarcity. It's the biggest lie of all. Now, that's not to say that we have unlimited resources from the earth. Of course not. I'm an environmentalist. I'm a conservationist. That's a value that I honor and preach. So sure, when it comes to conserving the resources of the earth, yes. But the scarcity I'm talking about is this myth, this lie that everyone on this planet, well, some of them are just going to be poor. Some of them are going to starve. That's just the way of the world. There's not enough to go around. No. There's plenty. There's plenty to go around. And for some of us, it's just an undeniable truth that we try to shout from the rooftops. But even for us, it's awfully nice once in a while to get some good old-fashioned roll-up-your-shirt-sleeves research to bear this out. And so that's what the Institute for Policy Studies has done. Reading again from their summary, we document the scale of America's dynastic wealth, the threats this poses to our society and democracy, and offer detailed recommendations for how to reverse these trends. As always, I'll link to the Facebook page, but if you just want to look it up on your own, Silver Spoon Oligarchs, Institute for Policy Studies, that'll get you there. All right, key findings. Let's just give you the bullet points. Dynastic families control a staggering amount of wealth. In 2020, America's 50 wealthiest billionaire family dynasties together held $1.2 trillion in assets. By comparison, the bottom half of all U.S. households, an estimated 65 million families, shared a combined total wealth of just twice that, $2.5 trillion. Dynastic family wealth grew 10 times the rate of ordinary families. And if I'm not mistaken here, let's see, that's not even counting the skyrocketing wealth gains due to the pandemic. the profiteering that happened. For the 27 families that were on both the Forbes 400 list in 1983 and the Forbes Billion Dollar Dynasties list in 2020, their combined assets have grown by, get this, 1,007%. Over a 1,000% gain in assets over just 37 years. In contrast, the wealth of the typical family in the U.S. increased by just 93% in inflation-adjusted dollars. So 93% to 1,000%. And that doesn't even take into account, and I don't have the numbers here in front of me, but cost of living, the cost of rent and a mortgage compared to 37 years ago, the cost of higher education. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I believe adjusted for inflation, cost of food has gone down, but that's mostly processed, unhealthy food. They found really cheap ways to get us our food. So they exploit migrant workers. They decimate the land. Big Ag has indeed provided really, really cheap food, but it's lousy, processed, unhealthy, toxic food. And the social cost, environmental costs, exploitation of labor, those aren't factored in to that nice little 79-cent price tag on the can of beans. Let's see what else. Those at the very top are blowing away even their closest competition. The 27 families on the Forbes list this past year. Now we're talking raw numbers here, not percentages. 27 families in 1983 had a median increase in their net worth, adjusted for inflation, of 904% over those 37 years. In 1983, Walmart founder Sam Walton and his children were worth just $2.15 billion. Adjusted for inflation, that would be $5.6 billion in 2020 dollars. By the end of 2020, Walton's descendants had a combined net worth of over $247 billion, an inflation-adjusted increase of 4,320%. Again, this is something we all know, but now we've got hard numbers from hard science telling us. And if these numbers are never going to convince us to do anything about this, we need a massive, massive reform on every economic front, including taxes. We need a huge wealth tax. And I'm not going to start from a position of weakness. Oh, toss me some crumbs. No. We need to eliminate the very fact that billionaires exist in this country, in this world. We just got to put the hammer down. The Mars Candy dynasty has seen its wealth increase 3,517% over this period. Cosmetics magnate Estee Lauder and her descendants have seen their wealth grow from just $1.6 billion in 2020 dollars to $40 billion, a growth rate of 2,465%. How'd you like your wealth to increase by 2,000, 3,000, 4,000% in less than 4 decades? If you're a young person, you can enjoy that gain. You can certainly pass it along to the family. And for our purposes here, again, I don't want this just to be about envy, about jealousy. No, every penny they hoard is a penny unspent on the great needs of the people in this country and around the world. Name any problem. Name the worst, most serious, difficult problem you can imagine. World hunger, war and peace, the climate crisis. Every single problem you can imagine is solvable. Not only is it solvable, it's easily solvable. It's a walk in the park to end world hunger. It's a walk in the park to end world poverty. It's a walk in the park to eliminate inequities in healthcare. And yes, I mentioned war and peace, because what do you suppose would happen if all of a sudden no one was going hungry? Nobody. Nobody on the planet needs to go hungry. It's unnecessary. It's a crime and a sin that it even exists. Imagine a world where nobody's hungry. Imagine a world where nobody is uneducated. where no one is homeless, where no one has to suffer the indignity, the humiliation of want. You don't think that'd have maybe a little bit of an impact on who's fighting with who? You don't think it might have a little impact on crime, violence, war? You don't have to be a genius. Anybody can understand this. No one can deny it. The hoarding of wealth, and specifically what the Institute for Policy Studies is telling us about here, dynastic family wealth, is the very engine that drives the worst imaginable, tragic, global conditions. Dynastic wealth is becoming increasingly persistent. Of the top 50 dynastically wealthy families on the 2020 Forbes billion-dollar dynasties list, 27 were also on the list from 1983. Of the 20 wealthiest families on the list in 2020, 13 were already in the top 20 in 1983. So, not a whole lot of movement. Hence the term dynastic. Oh, okay. I'm looking down the bullet points here. This does include updates from the pandemic. Dynastic families have seen their wealth grow significantly during the COVID-19 pandemic. Since the start of the pandemic in March of 2020, the top 10 families on the Forbes Dynasty list have had a median growth in their net worth of 25% in 1 year. Lord mercy. 25% in a year. Profiteering from the worst pandemic in 100 years. Yeah, we got a system that just really works great here. Dynastically wealthy families wield a great deal of political power and use it to further their interests. Some families spend millions lobbying for favorable tax, labor, and trade policies. They serve on committees, they've got PACs, they serve on advisory boards. Many have served in government themselves, including governors, cabinet members, and even vice president. Dynastic families exploit their philanthropic power, too, through charities and foundations. The top 50 families have set up more than 248 foundations, between them housing more than $51 billion in assets. While many move much-needed revenue to broader public interest charities, others fund groups working to reduce taxes on the wealthy and roll back regulations that constrain corporate profits. Yeah, we've talked about this before, and we could do a full episode on the scamminess of foundations, of charitable foundations, of rich philanthropists. Relative to their own self-interests, the so-called good they do in the world is minuscule, especially when you put it next to their own personal gain and benefit in public relations, in money laundering. Yeah, they can put a real pretty face on it, and they can write big fat checks and put them on, those big novelty checks, and they can get nice press. But yeah, if you want to get really depressed, look at the world of rich philanthropy. All right, we're looking at the Institute for Policy Studies and their recent research on how America's 50 largest inherited wealth dynasties accelerate inequality. Let's go to their recommendations. An emergency pandemic wealth tax? Yep, been proposed. We haven't gotten anywhere near a serious discussion about it. It's been proposed by those of us on the left and by a handful of progressive so-called Democrats, the ones that get labeled socialists and communists and radicals by the Republicans. So don't hold your breath on that one. But yeah, we need a wealth tax. Not only an emergency pandemic wealth tax, just generally, which is their next bullet point, an annual wealth tax. Senator Elizabeth Warren has proposed an annual wealth tax on households with wealth starting at $50 million, roughly the 200,000 wealthiest households in the U.S. She's only asking for 2% annual. The 2% annual levy would increase to 3% on every dollar of net worth above $1 billion. So, my God, that's all she's asking for. That's nothing. The proposal would raise almost $3 trillion over the next 10 years. And it's so damn modest. We could easily triple that, quadruple it, Make it 20 trillion over the next 10 years. Let's do some real good here. An annual wealth tax would exempt 99.9% of taxpayers. At least this proposal would. There again, why be so modest about this? Instead of 0.1%, why don't we go to 1.0%? Or maybe even, oh my God, dare I say 2% or 3%? I know numbers this high are kind of hard to think about. But, we've had a little bit of practice, right? How much did we spend on since the pandemic? About 10 trillion overall? 6 trillion, I think it is. And they're asking for another couple trillion. Democrats have a proposal for 6 trillion on the infrastructure because the Republicans have now dickered this down to a few hundred billion. So Democrats like Bernie and others say, well, what the hell? Republicans aren't going to work with us. Let's go ahead and just work on our own $6 trillion plan here. So with Elizabeth Warren's tiny ask, and it is a tiny, tiny ask, of just 0.1% of all taxpayers to give a lousy 2%, that alone, that tiny, tiny ask gets us $3 trillion. Double it, triple it, quadruple it. Increase it by tenfold. Every problem you can name, any and every problem you can name, could be solved overnight. World hunger, gone. Bankruptcy from medical debt, gone. Crushing student debt, gone. All poverty, worldwide, global poverty, gone. It's within our grasp. It's right in front of us. We're looking at recommendations here now from the researchers. A millionaire surtax, a 10% income tax surcharge on incomes over $3 million. We talked a lot about this, especially since that study recently that showed how little the wealthy pay in income tax. Well, because they don't make income. Income is what you make from working, and these people don't work. They draw their wealth from capital gains, from dividends, etc., etc. So they basically pay no income tax, or in some cases literally pay no income tax. So a millionaire surtax would take care of some of that. A progressive estate tax. Our buddy in the Senate, Bernie Sanders, has introduced legislation to strengthen the federal estate tax and aggressively close down avoidance mechanisms. It's a nice way to put it. Avoidance mechanisms. Oh, man. Yeah, that's another recommendation. Let's see. Do they have that anywhere on the list? Closing loopholes, simplifying the tax structure, simplifying the law. So rich folks can't get a room full of lawyers on the job and just, with a half day's work, do the finagling, and they come out of the room and say, okay, we figured this out. You don't have to pay any taxes. Legally. We found out legal ways to do it. Now, there's some illegal ways to do it too, so take your pick. You can do one or either or both. An inheritance tax on heirs. In aggressive efforts to avoid the estate tax, a lot of money has been shifted to dynasty trusts and other mechanisms outside the reach of estate taxation. State-level estate and wealth taxes. So we're talking of the 50 U.S. states as well as the feds restructuring their tax system a little bit. Several states, including California and Washington, have legislation pending to institute a wealth tax and make their state estate taxes more progressive, with higher rates on billionaires. And then the last recommendation on this bullet point list here. None of these proposals will succeed unless the U.S. shuts down the tax loopholes, offshore tax havens, and dynasty trusts that enable the very wealthy to hide their wealth at a dizzying pace. So, yeah, all right. We see these headlines from time to time. We shake our heads, oh, what's to be done? We shake our fists, demand that something must be done. A handful of progressives in Congress, the Bernie Sanders of the world and the Elizabeth Warrens of the world, try to make a dent here and there. God bless them. But where have we, how far have we come in the 37 years that this study looks at, from 1983 to 2020? All right, finally, proposals to shut down the hidden wealth system. 1. Establish a federal rule against perpetuities. To close down dynasty trusts, William and Mary Law School professor Eric Cades calls for a federal rule to limit the lifespan of trusts, what he calls the National Anti-Feudalism Act. Trusts would not disappear, but the ability to sequester wealth for centuries would be curtailed. Again, these proposals, my God, they are so f***ing timid. How could anybody object to these? What else? Outlaw certain types of trusts. Bernie Sanders' bill would end tax breaks for dynasty trusts and other sophisticated wealth-hiding provisions. And the bill would further, let's see, 4 items here under that heading. So, outlaw certain types of trusts by doing what? Strengthen the generation-skipping tax. Taxes skip a generation? Designed to prevent avoidance of estate and gift taxes by applying it with no exclusion to any trust setup. Okay, that I don't know. We're getting into the weeds here. Prevent abuses of grantor retained annuity trusts, GRATs. Here again, we're getting into areas I know nothing about. I can't even pronounce some of these things. By barring donors from taking assets back from these trusts just a couple of years after establishing them. Yeah, these are just... So not only are the laws themselves too complicated, the proposals, the solutions, are also too complicated. So they're losing me. Let's just make this simple. Just take their damn money. I don't care. All right, let's finish this up. Prevent wealthy families from avoiding gift taxes by paying income taxes on earnings generated by assets in grantor trusts. Yeah, grantor, grantee. Now, see, grantor isn't a word I don't think I've ever used in my life. Okay, yeah, this is just what we were talking about. They don't get their income from working, but they're still making income, and we have to tax it. Finally, limit the annual exclusion from the gift tax, which was meant to shield normal giving done around holidays and birthdays from tax and record-keeping requirements. Oh, I see. Okay. So, under this exclusion, you can give a so-called gift to a trust at Christmas time and keep it entirely out of the realm of taxation. So, just one of many. And this is just an overview of this study here. I'm guessing, I'm quite sure there are probably thousands of examples like this. There are so many provisions. I'm always complaining about these 1,000-page, 2,000-page bills. It's insane. I want to live in a world where the laws are clearly understandable to the citizens who have to vote on them. I mean, of course, we don't vote for individual bills, but our representatives are voting on them, and we're supposed to be able to knowledgeably object or support the activities of our representative through democratic elections. So we should be able to understand what's going on. And it gets so damn complicated. Yeah, bills should be a page or two, and everybody should understand what they mean. They get voted up and down. Boom, next. Just hit that gavel, go to what's next. Instead of jamming these huge bills filled with thousands of articles and paragraphs and sets and subsets and provisions where the legislators themselves don't even understand what's going on. All right, what's the final word on this thing? If Congress fails to act, the executive branch should dust off regulations first proposed in 2015 to address the valuation discounts described above, as well as take additional action to limit the use of trusts that are ripe for abuse, such as intentionally defective grantor trusts. They've even got, in parentheses, they got an acronym for that, IDGTs. An IDGT. See, this is where this gets comical. An IDGT is an intentionally defective grantor trust. Imagine that. Something so well established, it deserves its own acronym. Something that is intentionally defective. God. So there it is, from the Institute for Policy Studies, telling us in great detail and alarming numbers what all of us already know. Again, the report from the Institute for Policy Studies, Silver Spoon Oligarchs, How America's 50 Largest Inherited Wealth Dynasties Accelerate Inequality. And just to close this out and repeat, it's not about envy, it's not about jealousy. I suppose if everybody had what they needed, if we've solved all world problems, hunger, war, healthcare, education, if everybody was doing all right, then we wouldn't have to worry about a ceiling. Make all the money you want. Not hurting us. But as this research points out, and as common sense will tell you, of course it's hurting us. Of course it is. It's the very reason for our ills. It's not a lefty, commie platitude to say rich people are the cause of poor people. These are the facts. It's not an opinion. It's not something we just dreamed up. It's not something we just made up or pulled out of our butts like the right wing tends to do. The whole idea of trickle-down economics was pulled directly out of their butts. No, this is just truth. And any honest research and looking at the numbers will tell you, you can't have a billionaire without most people being screwed. You can't have excess wealth without crippling poverty. They go hand in hand. One creates the other. One causes the other. So let's get on it. And what do we say around here? You got to go left. You got to go left, and then left again. Because there ain't no way. The Republicans of this world, the fascist parties, the autocrats, the austerity promoters, even the centrists, the Joe Manchins, the Joe Bidens of the world, the centrists are never going to get us where we need to go. It starts with Bernie. It starts with Elizabeth Warren. It starts with AOC. And then we got to continue the trend and keep going until we get to the point where we say, yep, there's no such thing as a billionaire. That's going into the pages of history. And if I had my way, you could take that all the way down to a couple of million. Nobody needs it. And of course, my ultimate goal, every single goddamn person on this planet, once everything is distributed equally, is equal. There's absolutely no moral or economic requirement for rich people and poor people. If you buy into that, then you're buying into the lie of trickle down, and it's never been true, regardless of how popular it once was as a theory, and still is among a certain cohort. It's never been true, it never will be true. The only thing that's true is that if you're alive on this planet, you have human rights. And whatever economic systems or conditions are required to guarantee those human rights, those are the conditions, that's the system that we have to embrace. And the current system, as accentuated over the last 37 years of this study, will not only never get us to equality, to equity, it'll keep us going down the road of inequality, of injustice, in the most tragic and unjust terms we can fathom. So let's get on it, folks. Hit the streets, do what you need to do, and when you get into that voting booth, you got to go left, and then left, and then left some more. All right, I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.